I want to talk about an idea that makes many people uncomfortable, especially in modern society. Appearing poor in order to become rich at a first glance. That sounds backward. Most people believe wealth should look like wealth. They believe success should be visible, admired, and validated. They believe that if you are doing well, you should show it through your car, your house, your clothes, your lifestyle. That I disagree. That I, in fact, I've spent most of my life doing the opposite. And I'm convinced that one of the most reliable paths to long-term wealth is the willingness to look unimpressive in the short term. This is not about pretending to be poor. It's about not signaling wealth before you actually have it. It's about resisting the powerful human urge to convert financial progress into visible consumption. And it's about understanding how incentives, psychology, and compounding really work. The confusion between wealth and appearance. Most people confuse income with wealth and wealth with appearance. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you keep. Appearance is what you show. The tragedy is that appearance often destroys wealth before it ever has a chance to compound. That I've seen this repeatedly. People get a raise, a bonus, or a promotion, and almost immediately, their lifestyle expands to absorb it. Bigger apartment, better car, nicer restaurants, more subscriptions, more comforts. They tell themselves, I earned this. And perhaps they did. But earning money and keeping money are two entirely different skills. If you want to understand why most people remain financially fragile their entire lives, look at how quickly they turn money into lifestyle. Why looking rich is so expensive. Looking rich is one of the most expensive habits you can develop. IT requires constant spending. That IT requires maintenance. That IT requires upgrades. And it requires debt more often than people admit. The problem is not a single purchase. The problem is the pattern. When you buy things primarily to signal success, to yourself or to others, you lock yourself into a cost structure that demands continuous income. Your freedom shrinks as your expenses grow. That is not wealth. That is dependence. True wealth gives you options. False wealth takes them away. The quiet advantage of modesty. There is a quiet, often invisible advantage to living modestly while your income grows. Margin of safety. Margin of safety is one of the most important ideas in investing and in life. It means you have room for error. You can survive mistakes. You can endure downturns. You can wait. When you live below your means, you build resilience. You reduce stress. You increase optionality. When you live at the edge of your income, every setback becomes a crisis. People underestimate how much mental clarity comes from financial breathing room. It allows you to think long-term instead of reacting emotionally to short-term fluctuations. Why appearing poor feels uncomfortable? Let's be honest. Appearing poor, or at least not appearing successful, can feel uncomfortable. Humans are social creatures. We compare ourselves constantly. We want approval. We want reassurance that we're doing well. When you don't upgrade your lifestyle to match your income, people may assume you're struggling, cautious, or even failing. That discomfort is the price of independence. Most people would rather look successful and feel anxious than look ordinary and feel secure. That's a terrible trade, but it's a common one. The middle class trap. There is a particular trap that captures a large portion of the middle class. That it goes like this. Earn more money, increase lifestyle, increase fixed expenses, reduce savings rate, increase dependence on income from the outside. It looks like progress. From the inside, it's a treadmill. People in this trap often earn good money, but have little control over their time. They are one paycheck away from stress, one downturn away from panic. They don't lack intelligence. They lack discipline over signaling. Wealth is what you don't see. One of the most important truths about wealth is this: real wealth is invisible. You can't see someone's investment portfolio at a dinner party. You can't see their cash flow from assets. You can't see their freedom. What you see are cars, watches, homes, and vacations. Those things often represent money already spent, not money still working. That I've known many people who looked wealthy and were financially fragile. And I've known people who looked ordinary and were extraordinarily wealthy. Appearances are not evidence. They are often distractions. Delayed gratification is not deprivation. People often misunderstand delayed gratification. They think it means suffering, denial, or joylessness. That it doesn't. Delayed gratification means choosing a better reward later over a smaller reward now. That it's not about never enjoying life. It's about sequencing enjoyment intelligently. When you invest first and consume later, consumption becomes sustainable. When you consume first and hope to invest later, investment often never happens. The order matters. Compounding requires time and silence. Compounding is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't produce immediate excitement. In the early years, compounding looks like nothing is happening. That's why most people give up before it has a chance to work. Appearing poor during this phase is almost inevitable, because you're not converting progress into visible symbols. But if you stay patient, the curve eventually turns. And when it does, the results are disproportionate to the effort. Those who interrupt compounding to satisfy ego rarely experience its full power. Ego is the enemy of wealth. If there is one enemy of long-term wealth, it is ego. Ego wants recognition now. Ego wants proof. Ego wants admiration. Ego encourages you to buy things you don't need to impress people who aren't paying attention. Rational behavior often looks boring. Ego hates boring, but boring is where wealth grows. Why I don't upgrade quickly? I've never believed in upgrading my lifestyle simply because my income increased. When income rises, I prefer to do three things: increase savings, increase investments, increase optionality. Only later, much later, do I consider lifestyle changes, and even then, cautiously. This approach gives me flexibility. It allows me to wait. And waiting, in investing and in life, is a powerful advantage. Appear poor. Think rich. Appearing poor does not mean thinking small. On the contrary, it allows you to think bigger. When you are not burdened by expensive habits, you can take calculated risks, invest in long-term opportunities, walk away from bad deals. Say no to things that don't align. You are no longer forced to trade your time for money at unfavorable terms. Freedom grows quietly. The psychological freedom of low expenses. Low expenses are underrated. They reduce fear. They reduce stress. They reduce dependency. They also give you negotiating power. You're not desperate. You're not rushed. You're not forced. This psychological advantage compounds just like money does. People underestimate how much poor financial decisions are driven by fear. When you remove fear, your decision-making improves. The difference between being cheap and being rational. Let me be clear. This is not about being cheap. Being cheap is refusing to spend money even when it creates value. Being rational is spending money where it truly matters. I don't hesitate to invest in things that improve my judgment, increase my productivity, protect my downside, create long-term value. But I am extremely cautious about spending money for image. image doesn't compound. Time is the ultimate asset. The goal of wealth is not luxury, but it's control over your time. When you appear poor while becoming rich, you are quietly buying time in the future. Time to think, time to choose, time to rest, time to walk away. Those who spend their money trying to look successful often end up selling their time indefinitely. That is a poor trade. Why this strategy is hard to follow. This approach goes against social pressure, marketing, human psychology. We live in a culture that celebrates visibility over substance. It rewards appearance more than patience. Choosing a different path requires independent thinking and the willingness to be misunderstood. But independence has always required a tolerance for being out of sync with the crowd. The long view. If you take the long view, 20, 30, 40 years, most short-term discomfort fades into irrelevance. What remains is financial resilience, optionality, peace of mind, freedom. Those things are worth far more than admiration from strangers. Final thoughts. Appearing poor to become rich is not a trick. It's a consequence of understanding how wealth actually works. You don't build wealth by signaling success. You build wealth by retaining capital, investing rationally, and letting time do the heavy lifting. Most people never become wealthy because they interrupt the process too early, converting progress into proof that if you can resist that urge, you give yourself an enormous advantage. In the end, real wealth is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not need validation. It simply works quietly, steadily, and relentlessly. And if that means appearing poor for a while, that's a small price to pay for lasting freedom.